In this episode of the Encourage Inspire podcast, I'm joined by songwriter, producer, TV and film composer, and artist Shay Watson. This was a great episode, man. Shay and I got connected with a mutual friend of mine, my big brother Jean-Dominique, and we had a chance to chop it up in his story. And he talks about his early love for music, which ultimately turned into, him teaching band and him not ultimately realizing that's what he wanted to do, going to work for a label, and then which turned into not a label but a music publisher, which ultimately turned into him, connecting with one of the artists he was working with, them forming a band called 10 Mile Road that led to a lot of success independently. And then they got signed to a major record deal, which ultimately was the demise of the band, which caused Shay to pivot into music licensing and sync, which ultimately got him to where he is today. And like I said, man, a great story, a lot of lessons to be learned. Hope you guys enjoyed this episode. Hey guys, welcome to another episode of the Encourage and Inspire podcast. This is episode number 91. And I've got a special guest with me today. I've got a songwriter, producer, engineer, probably all of it. My buddy Shay Watson, man. How you doing, man?
Doing great, man. Good to be here today.
Hey man, I'm so glad to have you, man. I mean, we got connected through my big brother, Jean-Dominique, what I'm
Oh, yeah.
saying? And you guys came to, and I set up a talk for you guys at my alma mater, Full Sail University. So it's just cool to meet and connect with you and learn about your story and the things that you've been able to do and starting out. And we'll get to that, but just starting out as an artist in a band, and then ultimately transitioning into producing and songwriting, and obviously now in the sync space.
Oh, yeah.
So there's a lot of things that that you've had over the course of your career, man. So I always like to ask this question, man. What when did you first fall in love with music, man? When was the first time you knew you like, man, this is something I just love,
This is a good question. And sometimes you can look on my social media and I'll put old pictures dating back to when I was 3 years old on
Mm-hmm.
there, tinkering around on a piano. And then there's another picture where I was like 11 years old with two stack keyboards, a trumpet in my lap, and a Fostex recorder at the side. There was something about music from the time I was a tiny child that I'm one of those people that always knew they were going to be doing music. There were instruments laying around the house. The upright piano that's in my living room right now was in my parents' living room when I grew up. I had two older brothers. One of them was a guitar player, the other was a piano player. They were much older than me, and it was one of those things where I just kind of tinkered around on instruments, and it started making sound and making sense to me early on in my early childhood. And then I had formal lessons when I was around 9 or 10, although I could already play, put the theory behind it at that point. But I've always been in love with music. So I, have always played. I was the little kid who would be asked to play at local events. Then it became regional events, and it's just something I've always done and always absolutely loved.
And I love that, man. I always get very interesting um, response when I ask that question. And it's always good to hear people because I believe that you know we can't live life without music. I just believe that it's impossible
Absolutely.
to live life without music. Anybody try to tell me, "Oh yeah, we can." Oh, you don't. Or they'll tell me, "Oh well, yeah, it's possible." No, it isn't. I
And
mean,
not at all.
it's not. It's almost impossible. Can you imagine the world? Can you imagine movies and TV shows and things if it was just no music and like in airports, no music in the mall, like just you just there's just so many areas where we just can't live without it. People would be bored out of their mind, you know.
And it hits us so early.
Yeah.
I have two small children. I have a daughter who's 10 and a son who's 8 years old.
Hmm.
And I'm seeing some of the same things in them that I saw in me.
Right,
Just
right.
as little tiny children to get through their emotions, I hear them singing.
Hmm.
I'll catch them singing just different musical intervals and different
Right,
lines, and
right.
playing lap drums, and it's just interesting to see that development there. But we as humans, we have to have it.
It's right. I try to tell people, because people, it's literally the soundtrack of our lives, and people, um, literally, music saves lives. It really does. And you know, and I'm not someone to tell people what their worldview is or however they want to portray it. I mean, that's up to them. And
Yeah.
I don't judge it that way. But at the same time, it's like you know, um, people need music to get through tough times as well as the good times. Can you
Yeah,
imagine? Can you imagine
absolutely.
a birthday party or why do you think even at a wedding, right? As soon as all that stuff's over, they got the music playing and everybody's having a good time. I mean, can you imagine like if we didn't do any of that, like have a good time, how much boring life
Oh
would
yeah,
be?
it would be that.
It'd be very boring. You think back to movies with silent movies back in the Charlie Chaplin days of silent movies and like having like not being able to hear things and the earliest motion picture like I'm pretty sure it was obviously back then it was normal they were used to that but just I can't just imagine that stuff without having something playing behind there because
Oh
it
yeah.
also amplifies what's going on in the scenes and things like that. And we'll dive a little bit more deeper into that. But I want to start with talk to me about your days in the band, like when you first started. Your days in being an artist first. You
Oh
know,
yeah. Okay.
and talk to me about when you knew you wanted to be an artist, and then kind of go through the process of maybe of getting a record deal and how that works
Sure.
compared to what you're doing now.
Absolutely. And in talking about it, I'll have to back up a little bit
Okay.
because I was always in performance groups
Okay.
growing up. Yeah, I performed, like I said, at little regional events solo wise. I was always asked to play piano at things, whenever there was any local civic event, and always put little Shay up. He's going to be on the piano, or he's going to be playing trumpet or trombone. I was also a brass player. But I got in high school and I was in band, different bands there, marching band, jazz band, symphonic band, and also through high school I marched drum and bugle corps, which I marched Orlando Magic. And so I
Very
spent
cool.
time down there. I remember, just a little side story. I was actually in the little group that played for Shaq when he
Okay.
got off the airplane.
I remember that. Oh, you were there when
I was there. We got to meet him right after they drafted him. That was around 1992.
1992, right? 92.
92, man, Shaq. And I remember we played the B-52 song Love Shack
Oh wow, very
when he
cool.
was coming down there. But
Very
yeah,
cool.
so I fast forward past high school, went to college. I majored in music. And here's the thing. The growing up, I always wanted to be in a band,
Okay.
like a rock band or pop band, really pop band. I was brought up on pop music.
Hmm.
That was my favorite. And but being a kid from South Alabama, I just didn't know the ins and outs of that or how it worked. And what was always modeled for us was, yeah, you're going to play local stuff, you're going to play regional things, but you're going to go to school for music, and then after school, here are your options. We didn't have too many options. You were either going to teach music, or you were going to be a choral director, band director, or music minister. If you were going to play in a group, you were going to play music at one of these little places just on the side. So I wasn't thinking at that time about the whole record deal thing. I was thinking about making music and just trying to find how to make myself as a musician fit into the world. And what happens after college? Well, during the whole time, as a kid, starting at about 12 years old, I was writing music. I was writing music notation, piano pieces. I'd gotten into writing score, and composer that had moved to our town took me under his wing and started educating me on how to actually write orchestral score. And so I was doing that, and I thought, gosh, how can I make this work? So I got a job as a band director for a couple of years, and I was teaching one of the absolute worst bands in the county where I was placed. I mean, these guys were before I got there, they were ranking low on, every time they went to any competition or district concerts, they were ranking very low. Well, when I got there, I realized, well, past band directors, and they had always had a line of about seven or eight of band directors before I got there that would come leave every year. And when I got there, I assessed every kid's ability level and actually wrote pieces for the entire group that just worked. And we went from being my first year the worst band to being best in class band in the county. Well, that or in that region, actually in the district.
That's awesome.
But and this is all walking up to being in coming to Nashville and being in the band. Well, I stayed there for about a couple of years, and I was just I love the kids, but the whole administrative side of teaching was just sapping my creativity, and it wasn't allowing me time to write. So I needed to take about a year off and just figure out, what are you going to be doing with the rest of your life? Because as a school teacher, band director, I could see the next 25 years. You kind of know, okay, after you're here this amount of time, you'll get tenured. After this amount of time, you'll do this, and you'll probably move up the chain. Principal. Nothing wrong with any of that, but that's just not something I wanted for myself. So I put in my resignation, and I was just kind of taking a little bit of time off, had some money saved up, do a little writing, some investigating, and what to do. And a buddy of mine that I'd gone to college with that was an entertainer, he was living in Nashville at the time, and he said, "Hey, Shay, come to Nashville and just crash on my couch. I've got a a roommate that lives with me that's a guitar player, another roommate that is an engineer for a popular artist. Here, just come up and crash on couch, and you don't have anything to do, anywhere to go. Just take in the scene." And so I did that. I got in my car, with a little box, drove up to Nashville, had a few clothes items in it, and that was 26 years ago. And I've been here ever since. But I, for the first year that I was in Nashville, I was trying to just meet people.
For sure,
And
for sure.
just not to push myself on anyone, because I was smart enough to know, hey, you've been writing all of this music that was more for for ensembles, for symphony bands, for jazz bands, and this and that. But that's not what is needed in the commercial music industry. So, I told myself, just be quiet. Don't don't play any music for people too early on, because people develop their opinions of you very early on. Just take it in, educate yourself. And so that's what I did. And, but I was somewhat fortunate. This was the late 90s, about 6 months into me living in Nashville. By and I'm not sure exactly how this well, I'd gotten a job at Belmont University, just working in some random department just to pay my bills, because money ran
Of course.
out pretty
Yeah, no,
quickly in Nashville.
you gotta do
And
that. Yeah.
yeah, and so I was there, and a little funny side note, the story, basically there was the position that they hired me for really should not have existed. Uh, a monkey could have done what I was doing. And I think the university finally realized, hey, this guy has nothing, that he's doing during the day, but sitting in an office. And what I was doing was I was taking my guitar in every day, and I was sitting there writing songs and doing the little work that they gave me to
Right.
do. And they finally said, well, we're going to close off this job completely. We're not, it's nothing wrong with you, but we can't justify this job. So I remember that day I was walking across campus, and they had a great music department there. And I walked through the school, and I saw this number that was on one of the postings looking for internships at a little record label slash publishing company here in town. And I thought, well, life's open again right now. No job, nothing to do. I'm going to call this number and see what it leads to. And I called it, and the person who the receptionist there scheduled a little meeting. I came in the next week to to interview, and on the spot I could tell that things were going well.
Right.
And so I got offered an internship, long story short. And what I
So
did
that
during
was
that
paid, non-paid, right? Non-paid internship.
non-paid internship. And what I was doing was basically the grunt work. I was allowed to sit in on writing sessions with some of the staff writers that they had there at the publishing side of the company. And I was also offered the chance to go into the studio when they were working with artists and just be a fly on the wall and watch and listen. And so that's what I did. And after about 3 or 4 months being there, I was taking what I was learning in these writing sessions and studio sessions, and I was applying it to myself at home. I would stay up at night writing just lyric after lyric and melodies, and tracking on. Gosh, I think at the time I was using some early version like Cubase or something. I was just trying to get my music down, and the guy who was the basically president of the label, he and I started to become friends outside of the record company. And I asked him, hey, do you mind if I just show you some stuff I've been working on? And he said, yeah, sure. And I'm sure he was thinking I was going to bring in two or three little pieces of music, but I brought in a box like all these lyrics I'd been writing.
Right.
And So he picked through those, found my best that I had, and then said, okay, here's what I'm going to do. I'm not going to sugarcoat this. I'm going to rip these apart. And so he ripped them down to the bare bones. And here's why this works. Here's why this doesn't work, and started educating me on the craft. Well, instead of you know, being huffy puffy, well, I know better. I took the advice and I took those pieces and I made them better, and I started bringing them in here. Look, here's what I've done. And pretty soon, everything started making sense to me from a songwriter standpoint. And I started bringing in more and more pieces that were both sounding great and lyrically were where they needed to be. And as it turns out, within that first year and a half of me being there, I was writing and bringing in more pieces than the the staff writers who were actually paid to her. So at the end of, I think it was about the year and a half that I've been there, they offered me a staff writing deal. And so it was a small amount of money. I mean, it was so small, but it was a little bit of money that just kind of went toward rent. I was still having to work a part-time job on the side, then come over to the publishing company, and again, the publishing company was attached to a label, write for them, and that was my life. Well, now this is where we're walking up to the band. So during the time that I was there, the label started working with an artist, started developing this young 20-year-old.
Okay.
I was around 25 at the time, so I was about five years older. And I stood they put me writing with this new artist that they were developing. And we started hitting it off. We were writing some really, really great songs, and we decided, hey, let's go out on the road, or let's go out as a duo and try out some of these songs. So we went and tried them out a little bit around town in Nashville. I would sing harmony, he would sing lead, and we'd get a decent response. But Nashville's one of those places where everyone is here. Well, at that time, everyone was here to do music. So when you go out to writers' nights to play, what you encounter is a lot of other writers in the room who think that they're the best and they're only there so they can, get there and perform. They're not even paying attention to the performances that are happening. So nobody's really listening to you, except for the few tourists who may have come in that night. So we decided to, hey, let's just go on. Let's go on the road. We're riding here, but let's go out as a duo. Let's not make this anything too serious too soon, but let's just go book ourselves as two Nashville writers, artists, as a duo. And we started booking a few small shows, booked some in Alabama and Louisiana, and we started getting a little following. And we had people that would follow us from one show to another just to hear these two young 20 something year old Nashville guys who were playing. Essentially, we were playing pop music, but we were playing it to guitars, and was taking my keyboard out at the time. Well, while we were one show down there, this other fella who was younger than both of us, I think he was about 19 at the time, approached us and said, "Hey guys, can I take you to dinner?" Takes us out to dinner and convinced us to bring him back to Nashville with us. And so literally His name Cole Bruce. He's one of my longtime friends now. He plays for the country artist Jake Owen at this point, but he packs his bag, gets in the car, comes back to Nashville with us, lives with the other uh artist that I was out on the road with, and
Right.
we formed a trio. Well, we thought, you know what? It's what we've got here isn't really as unique. We've got a keyboard player and two guitar players. We need to make this where it looks cooler. So I'm sitting in my living room at my apartment, and both those guys drive up with this huge, massive upright bass and an accordion. And they said, "Hey, we've decided something. Jacob is going to play guitar. Cole's going to play mandolin and banjo, and you're going to play bass. We're all going to sing. We're not going to do country music. We're not going to do bluegrass. We're going to do pop music, but we're going to play it to acoustic instruments." And we were all like, okay,
Interesting.
giddy up and go. So we kind of patterned ourselves. Interestingly enough, we took the Beatles approach where we were all singing. Nobody was the main star. We were almost singing on top of each other and then bursting into harmony. And it worked. And what was crazy is we started booking little events, everything from churches to fairs to flea markets, and we just started playing out regionally. Well, we caught the eye of some talent promoters that started putting us on these events that they were hosting for I'm gonna laugh when I say this, for like beauty pageants that lead up to like the Miss USA or whatever beauty pageants. So we would go out and be the entertainment at these, and then we would get more gigs from that. And these were sweet paying gigs, and we were playing all these little gigs. And then we started getting on this circuit to playing universities. And at that time, we're like, wow, we're playing all these shows. We need an album. And so we went in, and I had, known enough from my experience at the publishing company. This is reaching back to give you the backstory and label that I went out and just bought the gear that we needed. And we set up in a house that I had wound up buying at the time. And we turned that into our studio, and we wrote the catchiest melodies we could that we could harmonize to. We practiced the mess out of our instruments. I mean, it was like those instruments, it, almost every hour of the day, they were with us. And what we did was we decided, hey, we're going to make a living out of this. We're already getting booked on these shows. We're starting to see some revenue come in. Quit your part-time jobs. So at this point, I talked to the guys at the record label publishing company. I'm like, hey, we're going on the road. I'm not going to sign another deal. I put in my resignation at the other part-time job I had at the time, which was like waiting tables or something. The other guys, they had gotten part-time jobs as painters. We're not going to do that. We're going to focus 24/7 on making this the absolute best band that we can. And that's what we did. We were either writing, recording, or practicing our show or playing a show. And it got to the point that we were playing at the end of our second year together. And this was around the year 2000, 2001. We were playing around 250 shows a year. We were traveling the entire United States, uh, playing, and we were going into clubs because they would book us as acoustic pop act. So we'd go into clubs and coffee houses. We would also go into universities, and we had this massive university following, and we started getting booked at festivals. And every top festival would have us because, hey, you're playing pop music, but you're playing bluegrass instruments. We could get booked on country festivals, pop festivals, bluegrass festivals. We were just playing as much as we could. 250 shows to 275 shows a year.
Mm.
And at that point, when you have product, and we had also worked up to that second year of hiring like three staff members
Right.
that were handling
Yeah. Yeah. So you had
publicity and booking.
right.
We
So
were
you had a real team at that point.
Yeah, so we were doing that as independents.
Before before
It got
independent was
so
cool, right? Before doing
yeah.
the independent thing was a thing, right?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And at that time you could make a good living. And to give you an idea, we were three guys going out. We wound up buying a Suburban that would carry us and our instruments if we needed to pull a trailer behind it. We'd do that. And we were going out setting up everything ourselves. And we were at the end of the week, three guys, we would make between 30 to 40 grand a week in revenue. And you know what was happening was we were at that point, whenever we'd come to a college town, we get played on college radios, and we wound up doing this spot also on NPR. And um, uh, so the we didn't go to the record industry. The record industry saw us. And at the end of about a 4 year span of us just hitting it so hard, doing all that from the development to the point where we're up playing 275 shows a year, we had five labels that came to us and offered us deals.
Wow.
We had Warner, we had Curb, we had an imprint of Sony Music, Viviton, which and Oh Boy Records, which was John Prine's label at the time, and we wound up signing a deal with one of those labels, and I won't say which one
Okay, yeah, it's cool. No,
in case you ask me some
it's all
stories later that might get me in trouble with
it's
some of
all
the
it's
people
all good. No worries.
at the label. But we wound up signing a label deal, and that was kind of the interestingly enough, that was the death nail
For the band.
for us
Mm, okay.
because you do all this. Everybody always thinks, oh, if I can get the label deal, the label deal is what's going to make my career. Well, it was kind of reverse for us. We had made a career and we were making good money. We had bought houses at this time, and we could pay for them with the money that we were making as solo independent artists. We were selling. It was crazy how much merchandise, T-shirts, and independent albums we were selling. So when the label brought us in at that point, we were under a management deal, and this is the story I'm going to segue to and tell. So they bring us in. And this was a little bit shady at the time. Said, "Hey guys, we know you've got management. We know you've got your two booking agents over here and your publicity person. We can't tell you to do this because this will get us in trouble. So we're going to tell you to do this under the table. We need you to fire everybody. We're going to hire we're going to put you with a completely new group of people. We need you to get rid of your management. We don't want them because we've got so and so, and I won't say the name that they had brought to us. They said he's currently managing, named three groups. He can pick up the phone, get you guys on Letterman and Leno. They were, big, the two big shows at the time, late night. He can get you on XYZ, and we're going to put you with this company booking wise. Uh, so we didn't want to do that because these guys that had been with us for at least half of our journey for a couple of years, helping get us to this point. So we didn't want to do that, but it was pressed on us so much that uh, life was made difficult for us if we didn't find a way to sever ties. So, in the end, I wound up wanting to stay with and keep the people on that had helped us get us there, but I got outvoted by the label and one of my band members. And so we wound up severing ties. Well, what they don't tell you when you do that is their sunset clause is attached to everyone.
Right.
So
Welcome to the
we
business.
were, yeah. So we wound up. This was in the middle of us cutting our first album, first label album, cutting our first label album under the label that we wound up having these lawyers call us lawsuits against us. Hey, you guys need to honor these other contracts here, but you're getting out, but you're still going to pay your sunset clauses, which I think on one of them, just the management alone was like still having to pay out 15% for 2 years after we released them from the contract, and then 10, then 5. We're having to do that, pay the booking agents their percentages and new management and booking their percentages. So after we started running the numbers, this put us not making, I mean, it was going to take us 4 years before we would see a dime of any money. So we had this, we had this $1.5 million label deal offered to us, and that sounds big, but a huge percentage of that was going to go out to old management, to new management. They were also wanting us to take our $250,000 recording budget out of that, and I'm getting a warning here on the recording.
Yeah, yeah, Shay. We got about a minute, so we're gonna end this, and then we're gonna come
Yeah.
right back in. We're gonna come right back in. Okay.
Okay. No problem.
Okay.
No
All
problem.
right. All right. Okay, we're back. We're back.
All right.
Back in.
Cool. Yeah. So there, and I'll talk a little faster to get us up to speed. I realized looking up at my clock, man, Shay, you're talking way too much on
No, no, no,
to
but no,
answer
but I
this
think you're
one
dropping so
question.
many. I think you're dropping so many gems, and because where I wanted
But
where I wanted to pick up on before you start up is just to how we can. Cause I want to be able to teach here as well, right? So I
mhm,
think
absolutely.
a lot of artists make the mistake of, like I said, I want a record deal. I want a deal. Now, understanding you actually, like I said, you did the inverse. You built an independent career and then basically had the machine come to you. The problem
Hmm.
was, the machine wanted to wanted you to fire all your people. Why? Because they can't control them.
Yeah.
They can't
Right.
control them. You know what I'm saying? They want to bring people in that they have relationships with that they can control,
Exactly.
which ultimately did what did you guys in, because for you guys to have to pay old management their people their money, new management, like how you guys able to survive? It's gonna take you 4 years to even see a dollar when you were making real money before that. It's crazy, but so many artists feel because they think if I go get a record deal, it's gonna be easier. I said, and to translate that into today's times,
Oh yeah.
I try to tell people that, you know, when you actually have a fan base the way that you guys have built what you guys have built back in then, I mean that's really all you need to be sustainable. I mean, you would have been able to sustain that and then go out and just keep hiring independent people. You could go get independent radio. All people is going to get you on the Jay Leno and Jimmy, all those type of shows. You could hire those people independently and still keep your same team on. You know what I'm saying?
Exactly. And that's what people don't realize.
Yeah.
Everybody wants a label deal, and they don't realize, hey, especially now, because
Yeah.
like you said, all these people you can go out and hire.
Yeah.
You've just got to build your business. The same guy that's promoting the artist
Yeah.
for XYZ label is the guy that you can also hire are, they're subbing it out themselves.
Right,
They
right,
don't
right.
have the now back. I will say, back in the day when we were with the label, we did have there was a radio staff there at the label, and you saw back then more so at the labels that they actually had staff in the office that was servicing it. But I
Right.
saw a change kind of the mid 2000s where a number of the radio people began leaving the labels and setting up companies themselves as independent radio promoters. One of my good friends that runs Nine North, who Larry Paregas, he's the guy that was on staff at Sony. He's got launched Dixie Chicks, Montgomery Gentry, just Gretchen Wilson, all these huge names.
Right.
He left and started his own radio promotions business, and is promoting and getting artists on the charts now, more so indie artists than
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
label artists.
Yeah.
But yeah, when we realized, hey, this isn't looking good for us. There's no money on the table. The album, we were having some issues with uh the creative control. We were told
Right.
and this is another one of the educational moments, and you probably know where I'm going with this, but we were told when we signed the label deal, you guys are going to get to have a lot of say on the creative side of things. Well, that was not true, because what happened once the ink was on the paper was gradual thing. Hey, we're going into the studio, we're cutting this album, this is your first radio release. And what happens is you've got a lot of money invested behind you, and people start getting nervous. They start taking in little snippets of what you've recorded to the radio team. The radio team says, "Oh, well, I can see us getting it on the radio in this market, but this market's not going to want to play us. We're going to have to hit Texas here. We're going to have to hit this. We need you to alter this sound." So, what had made us unique with people was three guys doing tight pop harmonies, um, in but playing them to the acoustic instruments. And they wanted to, when we got in the studio, guys, I think we're going to need to add some electrics here behind this, and we need to add another member to your band. Like, whoa, what's this? We want y'all to meet with this guy who we're bringing in to that we think we're going to try to push you to add to the band. And we're like, well, we're 4 almost 5 years into this thing. This is going to completely change the vibe. And so it got to where there was so much changes going on. Oh, and the other thing was, the name of the band was 10 Mile Drive. So what happens when you get signed to a label and you're a band? They do trademark search, international and national trademark search. You
Right.
can't have a name that's too close to another name that's existing in the marketplace in the genre that you're working. Well, what happened was we uncovered like uh, a popular band under the same name, 10 Mile Drive, in England. So the second year of our deal, we were going to be doing an international tour. So, and they were very well known there at the time. And well, that's going to clash in the marketplace. And we found this other band that's a West Coast band called 10 Mile Tide or 10 Mile High or something, because you're also a crossover pop group. That's going to not fare well. We need you to change your name.
Mm.
So you're changing our sound.
You
You're
know.
adding a guy, which is not what our audiences are used to.
Right.
And you're wanting us to change our name and rebrand and remarket us, even down to the clothes we were wearing, which, we at that point, we were just losing the audience that we
Right.
had grown to love us. But there was that and business things that were happening, and some infighting that started happening amongst band members. And I was also keeping in contact with our old management because I was friends with them. There was a lot of tensions that were just happening to where I remember we got to where when we would show up to do our shows on the last leg of our tour, we were literally getting into fights
Mm.
right before the show. I remember fist fights breaking out like 10 minutes before we were supposed to walk on stage and turn it on, pretend like we were all just, brothers and the happiest, with each other in the world. It was terrible. I remember, I remember we were in Orlando doing a show. We were in Orlando doing a show. This memory just came back to me. And we got kicked out of a IHOP restaurant because we got in a fist fight and flipped a table in
Wow.
Orlando, Florida. Um, and so that was happening, and you know, mid 20s, you do stupid stuff. We should have been more mature than that, but there was so much tension all the way around with the lack of money, the label telling us this, all these things that we stepped away and we said, okay, guys, this is nothing like it was supposed to look. We need to walk away.
And unfortunately, Shay, man, that story happens quite a bit
It
because
happens. It happens quite a bit, and the label was sensing that that was happening too, because we noticed, the recording sessions, they were getting fewer, and essentially the album that we were doing with the label got shelved. It's sitting in a vault somewhere right now, and the early albums we did as independents, you got to think, we hit all of this before YouTube, before Spotify and all the streaming stuff. So the product that we were selling, nobody was streaming it. It was all physical products, and we had
yeah,
sold like thousands of these.
and you can make way more money doing that.
Yeah,
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 back
you
then.
could back then. I
Right,
mean,
right.
you really could back then. But we had sold all these albums, and when you get signed to a label deal, they'll often buy up your albums that you haven't sold
Mm.
because they don't want that stuff circulating out there.
Yeah.
So I felt like at the end of that run, it was around 2007 at the time, like, man, all this stuff that I worked toward for 5 years is just
Gone.
gone. There's nothing here. And so what happened there, and I guess it was around 2006, 2007 when everything imploded, is I went into this big like depression where almost for a year I couldn't do anything. One of the other members of the band who he had wound up I kept in touch with both of the guys. It's funny, there was a lot of fighting between them more so than me and each of the members. And one of the guys called me, and he had basically wound up without his home. Hey, Shay, can I move in with you and your wife? These were days I was an early married guy, and so one of my old band members moved in. We were going to try to get through and record some new stuff, maybe reform the group, but we legally couldn't because of all the legal stuff that was brought against us. So we had to reform. But what happened was I wound up the management company that we had fired, which was managing some label acts, just not at the level that our label was wanting to take us. They came back and gave me an offer. They said, "Hey, you're still kind of under this sunset clause thing with us here. Why don't we just call it a day and let it transition from where we were managing 10-mile drive to managing you as a songwriter producer until we figure out what to do with you." And so
This is you, but this is just you by yourself now.
yeah, me by myself.
Okay.
So they came back and started managing me as a songwriter producer. And they brought artist James Clay, who was signed to In Pop Records at the time, who was doing kind of a rock reggae album. And they brought that to me to produce. They brought another group to work with, right with, which was the Sidewalk Prophets. They were indie artists at the time. They were pop Christian artists, and I started working with them, producing some stuff, writing with them, and I began working with artists that I had met on the road that we had been playing shows with and opening for. And I wound up getting back in the groove of songwriter, build up your production chops. And James, he had his label deal, and we recorded album for him. He wound up taking me out on the road with him as his bass player. So I wound up going and playing with him as bass and keyboard player, and I would do background vocals with him. Sidewalk Prophets wound up in a deal with Capitol Records, and the songs that I had produced with them, they wound up signing them over to whoever's handling their publishing at Capitol, and one of the A&R people at Capitol wound up uh, calling me, putting me in touch with a publisher who wanted to negotiate a deal with me with the Sidewalk Profits stuff. So I wound up started having this rebranding of myself as a producer. I had been living the artist life, since the late 1990s, and it was now around 2006 in this time that I took off the road, and I still had that yearning to be a recording slash touring artist who wrote his own music, but it gave me a nice breather from the road to where I could really get my production and writing chops up, and things were looking really bright and good again. Well, during that time period, uh, younger artist who I met at a conference that I'd been asked to speak at on songwriting. We wound up exchanging information. He winds up moving to Nashville and contacts me, and we started hanging out, and we formed a duo. We kind of hit it off. We sounded great together, and we formed a duo called Watson and Nash. And now this walks you up to sync what I'm about to say here. So he and I produced the album together. We pulled a team together. We went out on the road
Right,
to play shows. Now, here's the interesting thing. Something shifted between the time that I was off the road
right.
to when I went back on the road. And that shift was Napster slash iTunes and streaming had caught up with the artist world. So where I was used to before going out with, you know, carloads of albums to sell, bus full of albums to sell and selling them, making good money, we were going out making better music than what I had in the past, playing some pretty decent shows, but people weren't buying albums.
No.
They were buying our t-shirts, but they weren't buying the albums.
And it's interesting, Shay. I love that. That's a great point. I tell artists today, the music is the loss leader.
Mm-hmm.
So you're gonna lose on the music, but you're gonna make money on the ancillary things, right?
Yeah,
So it's easier to sell 100 T-shirts at 25, $30 a pop because a million streams on
yes.
Spotify is gonna net you about $4,000, right? But,
Yeah,
but
I mean, Spotify money is so, streaming money is so small. Now it can be decent, but I mean, you've got to be streamings into the millions to make
Monthly,
money.
monthly, monthly.
Yeah, because here's what you got to think about. And fortunate for me at this point, I've written with a ton of label artists, a lot of indie artists, a lot of people have released music. Not only me releasing my own music, but other music to where all of it feeds in together. So I have an okay amount that comes in from streaming, but it's still so much smaller than when we had that physical product. And that's what really threw me for a loop. What you said is true. The ancillary stuff that you do, the t-shirt sales, the other merchandise,
The
that's gonna
VIP
bring.
experiences. I tell
Oh
artists all the
yeah,
time, like
absolutely.
people will spend money to go have dinner with you or to
Absolutely.
go speak on a sound, anything that can give them a different element off the stage. So we
And
call
and
we yeah,
yeah, no, what I was going to say is I thought, well, gosh, you guys aren't buying the albums. You must not like the music. But no, it was a cultural shift that happened. When you're getting music given to you for basically for free, you
right,
ain't gonna buy albums. But these same people would, like you said, they would pay $400 to you just to support you and go to dinner with you.
right,
They love
right,
your
right.
music. So the album sales weren't reflecting whether somebody was liking your music or not.
Mhm.
They were enjoying the music and wanting an experience, but the
For
culture had
sure.
just changed where we're
Right.
not selling physical album products anymore. And so I had to, you know, um, adjust my thinking and learn from that. But what happened in doing that album that we did, which was called Mile Markers, we had a song on there that my idea of this one song we wrote called Bring It On was, hey, we need to write a sports song. And what we need to do is we need to send this album out to radio stations on game days for like everything from high school to college. We need to be sending these to sporting events. That my idea
Mhm.
was to get us more shows. That's what I was thinking in more so my finite thinking at the time was send
Right.
out sporting events. We can get more concerts at events in these towns where these sporting events are going on. Well, what wound up happening was one of the higher up guys from Fox Sports got the album,
Mm.
listened to this song, and wound up licensing it. And then ESPN did the same thing. And we wound up having this song called Bring It On, which was licensed for college game day.
Mm.
And at that point, a light went off. And I thought, you know what? Why are we spending all of this time going after album sales royalties on album streaming wise and these shows that aren't paying as much as they were before, less focus on this licensing thing.
Right.
That was around 2010 for me when the light went off. And I took that one song and I started calling up music supervisors. Yeah,
Nice.
well, anybody, I would call ad agencies, music supervisors. I would call anybody that listen to me, and I would use my past experience. Say, hey, I've had this licensing. Um, I want to send you some stuff where you listen. A lot of people, wouldn't give me the time of day, wouldn't listen to too busy. I get that, I understand that. But I had a couple that would, and I had this lady out in L.A. that'd been in the business for 30 years. To give you an idea, she was publicist on Tom Petty's first American Girl album. And she was also the publicist for Don King, the boxing promoter. So if that gives you any
Interesting.
idea to this woman's tenacity, she was the promoter for the promoter and just had this huge list. And she had gotten into doing representing people television and film. We hit it off, and she took me on as a client, and she wound up getting some of my early, well, some of my pop rock stuff around 2010 that I was doing, because I was doing both a combination of country and just straightforward pop rock, because
Mhm.
I love top 40 pop rock. That, I moved to Nashville, so what you have available to go out and do is country music. So I made myself fit into that, but my heart was in doing top 40 pop music, rock music. I also have a classical and a jazz background, but more so love the top 40 stuff. So she took that and wound up getting me on a show called Hollywood Heights, which was on Nickelodeon.
I think I remember that show. I think I remember that.
Yeah, well, they wound up featuring a song that I did off of one of my earlier pop albums, and the music supervisor at that show, Paul Antonelli, who's a great friend of mine now, he wound up getting hired to do a music supervision at Sony Music Pictures TV, CBS, for the show The Young and the Restless. So he brought my catalog over there to that show. And what happened was I began making some really good inroads with folks out in LA. They found out I was a multi instrumentalist, keyboard player, guitar player, and play drums, can play all these instruments. So I started getting phone calls for last minute sync requests
Mm.
on The Young and the Restless and some other shows that they were handling. They're like, "Hey, Shay, we're going to try this with you. In about 4 hours, we have a spot where we have got to fill it with and they had named the style of music. He could be jazz, and I would sit down and I'd play the piano parts. I'd grab my upright bass, play these parts, and I'd turn over a jazz trio. Or, Shay, we need a pop track for this scene. And I was getting these, and I would just absolutely kill myself to meet these deadlines, but to meet it in a quality way, to where I got to be on the short list for phone calls. For
Right.
if you need music and you needed it quality and you needed it fast, give this guy a call. You're going to get it. He's going to record all the instruments, he's going to mix and master all of it, and it's going to be in your hands by the end of the day, where you can
Master
pop it
level.
in,
Yeah, master
you
level.
know,
Yeah.
for the scene, either within the next couple of days or the next day. Sometimes I'd
Mm.
have to do this. And it got to be where, one of the biggest things I was getting was on Young and the Restless. There was three companies at the time handling the music for that show, and I wound up like becoming the top writer at one of those companies, to where I was, I was hearing myself between that and Discovery Networks. I was like having 10 placements on a day.
How was that money looking in terms of, compared to,
I
you get off the road and you go to streaming, but now you get,
and
how is
let me
that
tell you,
changing?
best thing I did, best thing I did. I didn't know what to expect, because here's what they ask. Here's what every writer who writes for Sync wants to know. How much am I getting paid? Well, that would have been easier to answer back in the early 2000s, because the production companies still had big
Budget,
budgets,
big
and they
budget.
could say, "Hey, we're going to give you X amount up front. We'll give you $20,000 up front for this track, or this buyout of these tracks." Then it came down to, as the 2000s progressed, oh, you're only getting 10,000. Oh, you're only getting 7,000. Oh, you're only getting 5,000. Hey, we're going to give you just gratis cues, because we know your back end is going to be so
Mm.
big. This. So with major network, now I think with Nickelodeon, I got paid some upfront because they weren't major network, but I didn't know what to expect from major network pay. Um, because they were not they were I was doing upfront gratis, with the expectation of just getting back end royalties, sync royalties off of this. And I'd ask, well, how much? Well, we can't really tell you because it depends on a lot of things. It depends where in the show, what part of the hour it's used, whether it was used as a featured song or a featured instrumental, or whether it was a background vocal or just background music track while the actors are talking. So much goes into the equation of finding, how much to pay you. And so when that first uh royalty check that reflected the period that I was in came in, I was like, wow, uh, this is more money than I had made, producing artists and going on the road before. Okay, we are shifting gears and we are focusing on sync music.
All in now, right?
And we are all in. I
Right.
mean, when when
I
when
can pay
you're
my mortgage. I can pay my this. I can do
yeah, yeah, and I can have all this money left over, and it
yeah,
was good money. It
yeah,
it
for
was
real.
it was really good money, and so that was around 2011, 2012. That well, 2010 through 2012 was my resume building time in the sync industry. About 2012, 2013's when I was just on television constantly. It got to be where it was weird. I remember I think it was like a Christmas holiday. I'd gone down to my parents' house because I was also writing for Hallmark, Sony Music TV and Film, CBS, Discovery Networks, A&E, to where within like a little short period of me sitting down on the sofa, flipping through channels within an hour, I'd heard myself like six different times on different networks. And I thought, okay, wow, this is really happening
Right.
here. And you learn a lot of stuff once you get into sync. You learn how to um you learn for one what voices to use. There's a certain
Okay.
type of if I'm just creating music for the day-to-day background for shows, you use voices that are not going to be too obtrusive because a lot of times they're going to place them behind actors dialogue, but sometimes you want to feature and then you can call in your voice that's more obtrusive and has more character to it. You learn how to uh, at what points to change your chord progressions and give breaks in what you're writing. You learn a lot, and what's going to work in the background, what's not going to work in the background, and so that's what I've been focusing the past decade on has been sync, and sync's worked out really really well for me. Now I will say we're at a turning point when 2020 hit. Um, a lot of things changed.
Okay.
Uh, all the shows went off the air. We didn't have anything to write for. So everyone that was in the sync world was just writing during that time. When we came back, 2021, everyone was pitching their music that they had written. So the competition was heavy. I was still getting a decent amount of sync placements, not nearly the amount I was getting pre 2020. So we go along, we start catching up, and then the Writers Guild strike hit us.
Mm,
So
mm.
I was in the middle of writing the theme song for a television show that was in the works for HGTV. And when the Screen Guild thing hit, it kind of put a halt on a lot of production, and a lot of that production didn't get picked back up. The show I was working on was one of those that didn't get picked back up at the time. So a lot of time was lost there. But looking at the future, I'm sitting at a place where I hit sync at a decent time, at a good time. I've made a lot of money off of sync, but there are there are a lot of opportunities, but what you see is the pay starts going down because as we move more towards streaming. Same thing that happened to the record industry, I see happening in the television sync world, to where you're seeing less people attached to the three major networks and cable outlets, and they're switching over to Netflix, Hulu, Prime,
Sure.
these platforms, and they're paying on a streaming rate. And that streaming rate
No.
is not sustainable where it's at right now. I can tell you, it's just not.
So how
And
does
if we don't get in there and start fighting for legislation that ups our streaming rate, I'm not going to have to worry as much as the young 20s and 30 somethings coming up. But 20 years from now, if we don't do something, uh, it's going to look scary.
yeah, yeah, I think people, because you got to realize, like, I know this lady. Her name is Tiffany Red. I don't know about her, but she
Uh-huh.
had a company called 100%ers, and she basically said because songwriters at the end of the day, this one is you're the only job that gets where Congress and the government dictates your pay rate. You know what I'm
Yep,
saying? Like it's the only job
absolutely.
because by law you can only so you don't get to get a session fee when you're writing for an artist.
Right.
You don't get to say I'm charged. I mean, you probably can for an indie, but in
Yeah.
the major artists, you're not. You can't go. You might do 5 sessions a day. You can't charge for the session fee. You also got to get your own lunch, own
Yeah,
transportation, all those things. And
absolutely.
then if you're lucky enough, you might tell that producer, "Hey, I know you're going to get paid 75 grand, 7,500 for this. Why don't you charge 10,000? Give me 3 grand for my time for my because you don't even know if that song's going to get placed."
Right.
So
Exactly.
there's no way. So what they don't understand is, as artists, you have shows, merch, all the other things you get have revenue streams from, but the songwriter doesn't. And so it's really, really important for the songwriters to go and fight for that legislation because it's only the only way you be able to survive is by those royalty rates being increased. And again, for a long time, Steve Jobs was telling the record industry like 2000, hey, this whole internet thing is going to be a
Mhm.
thing. And if you don't
Yeah.
pay attention to it, it's gonna f with the music industry. And that's why he tried to create iTunes. And unfortunately, the record business didn't want to listen at the time. Well,
Yeah,
we
they
don't want to.
did.
They didn't care. You know what I'm saying? Now we're still trying to play catch up to what was happening in in the 2000s. This is why I tell independent artists like you know the goal is not to get a deal; it's to go directly to your audience. And I think that's
Right.
what we're seeing the record labels. We're seeing they're fire. Everybody's getting fired, bro.
Yep, absolutely. They're
Like it's
scaling down because
like
they're just standing enough money on the table.
so it's interesting because it's like so the days of the Taylor Swift era, those are gone.
Absolutely.
You're not gonna build those type of artists anymore. If you notice during the pandemic, right? You had all these
Hmm.
TikTok artists getting signed,
Hmm.
but they had great but they weren't real artists. They're just content creators with a following.
And the labels now are, yeah, I have this conversation with our buddy Jean. You know,
Uh,
the labels now, and you might talk to him about it,
yeah,
are kind of seeing that.
yeah, yeah,
They're
yeah.
saying, hey, we signed all these, but they're going out, they're doing shows, and
Not very good.
yeah, they're losing their audience there. You can sound good on a little short TikTok
Yeah, for sure.
video, and you can entertain there, but when you get out on the road, it's got to last.
You got to be able to
You got to bring it.
give a show, right? And so I think the industry's changing. The independent music scene, I think, as long as it's gonna be people that's gonna love your stuff, the indie artists who are smart, they'll learn build your audience because people invest in the relationship. I teach this all the time with
Yes.
my class. Fan supporters, super fans will invest in the relationship,
Yep.
and
Hmm.
if they like you, they will like your music.
Yes.
And so
Yes.
that's something that I try to tell artists to do. Folk
And
like
that's where the hope is in this.
mm-hmm,
That's where the hope is in the music industry is
mm-hmm,
once you as an artist have that connection with your audience, man, keep that connection and be authentic to them, and they will support you. They will be your support.
you have we call it a microeconomy, and you'll be able to sustain yourself because that's not going to go away. That's because as long as there's people that still want music, you can still find a way touch them, that will be here. That's not going to change. I think the record industry and the corporate record industry is changing, and I
Absolutely.
think that the days of trying to build a career like a Beyonce, a Taylor Swift, that era is over, man. You're not going to see artists built like that. You're not going to see labels. It's just impossible to do now. It's just impossible to do in my humble opinion.
Yeah.
in my humble opinion, man. Shay, bro, this has been a great episode, man. And no,
Oh yeah, man. I've
so many,
enjoyed it.
so many. We didn't even get a chance to get really too much deeper, but I think this was a great conversation. And ever since we got a chance to get connected, you've been really supporting me and liking my stuff, man. I just know I wanted to have you on the pod, man. It's been.
Man, I love what you're doing. I really do. And any way I can support, I will.
I appreciate it, man. And where can the listeners find and connect with you, man? Before we get
Uh
out of here, how can they connect
yeah,
to you?
find me on Instagram, Shay_Watson_ music producer. I'm probably most active there. You can Google me and my other sites. Pull up. I'm on Twitter as Shay Watson Music. On Facebook too as the real Shay Watson. But yeah, Instagram. Find me Shay_Watson_music producer, and Shay is spelled Shay.
Wonderful, guys. It's been another episode of the Encourage Inspire podcast. Until next time, I'm out of here. Peace.
Sounds great.